History tends to repeat itself. The fall of empires, mass extinctions, Modern Warfare 2, and Avatar followed by a recession. The Stoics believed the universe is periodically destroyed in an immense conflagration and then experiences a rebirth, that these cycles continue for eternity, and the same events are exactly repeated in every cycle. Nietzsche's doctrine of eternal recurrence expressed similar ideals. Time is a flat circle. Everything we've ever done or will do, we're going to do over and over and over again. But who gives a tit about philosophy? What a nerd! Unless it applies to something important. Video games. I'm a big fan of Resident Evil, playing the original games way back in the beginning, before I even knew how to read, all the way to now playing Resident Evil 8. I've experienced the evolution of Resident Evil games firsthand. I began to notice a cycle. At first, the games are very faithful to the survival horror genre, then a mix of horror and action, and then more and more action, to the point where it doesn't even feel like Resident Evil, and then boom, a reset, and we're right back to where we started. The first 3 games were classic survival horror. You could argue that 3 started to get away from its roots, but all of them scared me, partly because I was still a little dumb baby. Then 4, we start to see the transformation of adding more of that 90s action film feel with more dramatic action and cheesy one-liners. 5 wasn't scary, but still had the Resident Evil feel, and then 6 was just too far gone. So the reset happened and we got 7, which went back to the simple survival horror roots of exploring a mansion while being very scared, and I loved it. And then we get Resident Evil 2 Remake, a great modernization of a classic that was still true to its horror roots. And then we got the Resident Evil 3 Remake, and you could definitely see the focus towards action starting to creep in again. And then Resident Evil 8 came, and while this game did have a small section that was scary, you could definitely tell they pulled the scares way back from Resident Evil 7. They even include a section that was basically Call of Duty. I enjoyed the game, but I really like the scary side of Resident Evil. And you would think that the devs would see the reception of Resident Evil 6 and understand that fans don't want Resident Evil just to be an action game. But the thing is, action sells. COD games are the best-selling games basically every year, and even Resident Evil 6 sold really well. So as the devs want to make Resident Evil games more and more marketable, it seems that they're making them less and less Resident Evil. And that brings us to the Resident Evil 4 remake. If time is a flat circle, where will this remake land on the Resident Evil cycle? The original Resident Evil 4 is one of the most acclaimed video games ever. It seemed to hit that sweet spot of atmosphere, horror, and action that I don't think any of the other Resident Evil games has done as successfully. So, will the remake be able to do the same, or will it turn into more of a bland action game? Judging from what we've seen so far, I don't think we have to worry. Enemy designs are creepier, you can see they added a crouch for stealth, which usually lends itself well to horror. The atmosphere seems to be pretty creepy, and they still have the other aspects of the original RE4 vibe, like the over-the-top kicking and the cheesy one-liners. There are some red flags keeping me from getting too excited though. Being able to parry a chainsaw with a knife is something that is just too over the top on the action side and takes away from the fear of the chainsaw guy, which was one of the scariest enemies in the game. A big part of what added suspense and fear into the gameplay of the original Resident Evil 4 was the tank controls. You'd have to run away from enemies and just pray that their attacks would miss. I'm not sure if a more streamlined and updated control scheme would lend itself kindly to the gameplay formula in the original game. Also, the way they advertised for Resident Evil 8 had me thinking it was going to be a much scarier game than it turned out being, and I worry they could be doing the same with Resident Evil 4 Remake. While overall I'm optimistic for this remake, I don't think I'm as hyped as many other Resident Evil fans. For one, being I can still play the original easily on my GameCube, so do I really need a remake? And, especially after Resident Evil 8, I'm worried they will go too hard on the action side. And, with modern gaming, I've learned to never get excited about anything anyways. But really, I'm just hoping they didn't take out the best line in all of gaming.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?